In this episode, we're going to take the part of Git that makes many beginners nervous and turn it into something you can reason about calmly: branching and merging. People often hear branching described as something only large software teams need. But the truth is that branches are useful anytime you want to try a change without risking your main line of work. For a Linux administrator, that might be a refactor of a script, a change to a configuration template, or a documentation update that needs review before you treat it as the new truth. Branches give you a safe lane to work in, and merges are how you bring that work back into the main lane when you're satisfied. Rebase and squash come up because they change how history looks, and history is part of how you troubleshoot and communicate. If you learn the mental models behind these ideas, you can choose approaches that fit your situation instead of treating Git as magic. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to our course companion books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at cyberauthor.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. To begin, it helps to define what a branch really is in a practical, non-mystical way. A branch is simply a movable label that points to a commit, and as you make new commits on that branch, the label moves forward. The important point is that the commits are the real history, and the branch name is a convenient pointer into that history. When you create a branch, you are not copying files into a separate universe. You are creating a new pointer that starts from where you are now. This is why branches are lightweight and fast, and why you can make them freely. For beginners, this is a relief because it means branching is not expensive or irreversible. It is just a way of naming a line of work so you can keep it separate until you are ready to combine it. Once you understand branches as pointers, merging becomes easier to visualize. A merge is a way of combining work from two lines of history so that both sets of changes become part of the same story. In many cases, Git can do this automatically because it can see that the changes touch different lines or different files. When it cannot do it automatically, you get a conflict, which is not a sign you did something wrong. A conflict is simply Git telling you that both lines of work change the same area in a way that cannot be combined without a human decision. For admin work, conflicts happen when two people change the same script function or when you update a configuration template while someone else updates the same settings. The right mindset is that conflicts are normal, and the goal is to resolve them carefully and intentionally, not to fear them or avoid branching altogether. Now let's separate merge and rebase, because this is where beginners often get lost. A merge combines histories by creating a new commit that has two parents, which is Git's way of recording that two lines of development came together. That merge commit becomes a visible point in the history graph where branches reconnect. A rebase, on the other hand, rewrites the sequence of commits by taking the commits from one branch and replaying them on top of another base commit. The end result is that the history can look linear, as if the branch work happened directly after the base branch without a visible merge point. This difference is mostly about history presentation and about how you think about the story you want Git to tell. Merge preserves the exact topology of what happened, while rebase can make history look cleaner by removing some of the branching shape. For an administrator, the practical question is often, do I want the history to show the branching and joining explicitly, or do I want it to read like a straight timeline? If you are working alone and you want a clean history for a small project, rebasing your feature work before you bring it into the main branch can make the log easier to read. If you are working with others, especially in shared repositories, rebasing can be risky if it changes commits that others have already pulled, because it effectively changes the identity of the history they are building on. In those environments, merge-based workflows are often safer because they avoid rewriting shared history. The deeper point is not that one approach is universally correct, but that rebase changes history shape, while merge records how histories converged. Once you understand that difference, you stop arguing about which is better and start choosing based on collaboration risk and clarity needs. Squash is another history-shaping tool, and it is best understood as a way of turning many small commits into one larger commit when you bring work into a main branch. During development, especially when you are experimenting, you might make several commits that represent intermediate steps, mistakes, or partial progress. Those commits can be useful while you are working, but they might not be valuable to keep forever in the main branch history. Squashing lets you compress that set of commits into a single commit that represents the final, clean change. For example, instead of keeping a sequence like attempt fix, adjust fix, finalize fix, you might squash into one commit called handle edge case and parser. That makes history easier to scan during incident response because each commit in the main branch tends to represent a coherent change with a clear intent. The trade-off is that squashing hides the internal steps, so you should only squash when those steps are not important for future understanding. This brings us to a conflict mindset, because no matter which workflow you choose, you will eventually hit conflicts. The key skill is to treat conflict resolution as a careful reconciliation of intent, not as a mechanical chore. A conflict means two sets of changes were both reasonable in isolation, but they now need a human to decide how they coexist. The first thing a calm conflict resolver does is understand what each side was trying to accomplish. If one change updated a variable name for clarity and the other change updated logic that used that variable, the correct resolution is often to keep both changes by applying the new name to the new logic. If you simply pick one side, you might lose an important improvement. For admins, losing a small safety check in a script because you resolved a conflict too quickly can create real operational risk later. So the right mental habit is to slow down, read both versions, and merge the ideas rather than just merging text. It also helps to remember that conflicts are usually localized. The whole repository is not in conflict. A specific file is, and often only specific sections of that file are. This is why reviewing diffs is so important, because it gives you context about what changed and why. A good workflow is to use Git's view of changes as a guide, but make your resolution decisions based on the meaning of the code or configuration, not on which version looks shorter or cleaner. In admin repositories, conflicts can also occur in documentation and templates, and those can be easier to resolve because the intent is more visible. Even then, you should be careful, because documentation conflicts sometimes hide a disagreement about how something should be operated. Resolving them thoughtfully is part of building a repository that teaches good practices rather than one that accumulates contradictory instructions. Another important part of the conflict mindset is anticipating conflicts by making branches small and focused. If you keep a branch open for a long time and change many things, the chance that someone else changes the same areas increases, and merging becomes harder. Small branches that address one purpose are easier to review, easier to merge, and easier to revert if necessary. This is very similar to the principle of small commits in daily Git workflow, but applied at a higher level. For a beginner, it can feel like extra overhead to branch for everything. But the benefit is that each branch becomes a contained story. That containment is what makes merging safer, because you can understand what the branch is about and decide whether the main branch should include it now, later, or never. When you branch this way, Git becomes a tool for managing change risk rather than a system you only touch when you have to. A related concept is choosing merge versus rebase based on how you want to handle integration. If you frequently integrate changes from the main branch into your feature branch to stay up to date, you might rebase your work to keep the branch aligned without accumulating many merge points. Alternatively, you might merge main into your branch periodically, which preserves the exact record of integration points. Again, the difference is mostly about history shape and shared understanding. In admin environments, the safest habit is to choose consistency across your projects so your future self knows what to expect. If one repository uses a linear history and another uses merge commits regularly, your mental parsing of logs will need to adjust each time. Consistency reduces cognitive switching costs, and that matters when you are troubleshooting under time pressure. The best workflow is often the one you can follow reliably, not the one that looks most elegant on a diagram. It is also worth noting that merge, rebase, and squash are not isolated choices. They are part of how you communicate with future readers of history. Git history is not only for you right now. It is for you later and for anyone else who touches the repository. A merge commit can be a useful landmark that says, this is where a feature was integrated, which can be helpful when you scan history during an outage. A rebase, linear history can be easier to read like a book, which is helpful when you want to understand how a tool evolved. Squash commits can make main branch history concise and high signal, which is helpful when you want to locate the commit that introduced a regression. Each choice affects the clarity of the story, so thinking about your audience is part of good Git practice. In admin work, the audience is often a tired human trying to fix something quickly, which should influence your preference toward clarity and simplicity. To bring this all together, the big idea is that branches are how you create safe space for change, and merges are how you integrate that change into the shared truth. Merge preserves the visible story of how work came together, rebase reshapes the story into a more linear flow, and squash compresses many steps into one clean summary when that helps readability. Conflicts are simply the moments where Git asks you to make a decision that only a human can make, and your mindset should be to resolve them by preserving intent and safety rather than rushing to make the error message disappear. When you treat Git this way, branching stops being scary and becomes a routine risk control tool you can use for scripts, templates, and documentation with confidence. That confidence is exactly what Linux Plus aims to build, because it means you can evolve your systems and your automation without losing track of how you got there.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.